He was a quiet, unassuming new student who just wanted to make it through the school day unnoticed. But when a group of classmates decided to target him, thinking he was easy prey, things didn't go the way they expected. They had no idea who he really was or what he was capable of. What happened next shocked the entire school and left everyone talking. Before we jump into the story, let us know where you're watching from. The new student's name was Jaden. He had just transferred into town and started at a local high school, where everyone seemed to know everyone. Jaden wasn't looking to make waves. He kept his head down, his focus on his classes. On the surface, he looked like any other kid. Just another face in the crowded hallways. What most people didn't know was that Jaden had spent years training in mixed martial arts. He was a disciplined athlete, though he never bragged or talked about it. But to the group of bullies who ruled the school's social scene, Jaden wasn't just the new kid. He was a target. His quiet demeanor made them think he was weak, someone they could push around without a second thought. These bullies were known for their loud, obnoxious behavior. They thrived on humiliating anyone they thought couldn't fight back. Jaden's calm, respectful attitude seemed to them like an invitation to pick on him. The school itself was a mix of cliques. There were the athletes who dominated the sports fields, the drama kids who filled the auditorium, and the bullies who lingered at the lunch tables, always looking for their next target. It was an environment where appearances mattered, and first impressions stuck. Jaden's quiet, humble nature didn't seem to earn him many friends at first. He didn't try to stand out, and in a school where standing out often meant survival, that made him an easy mark. The bullies started small. They'd make snide remarks in the hallways, laughing as Jaden passed by. They'd knock his books out of his hands and then walk away, pretending it was just a joke. Jaden never reacted, and to the bullies, that silence was a sign that they could push further. The truth was, Jaden wasn't ignoring them out of fear. He had learned, through years of MMA training, that reacting in anger only escalated situations. He kept his composure because he knew that real strength wasn't about showing off or starting fights. It was about staying calm and disciplined. In the classrooms, teachers noticed the dynamic. Jaden was quiet but respectful, always turning in his assignments on time. The bullies, on the other hand, were loud, disruptive, and often found themselves in detention. But they had built a reputation that kept most students at a distance. People knew not to get involved. Even the teachers hesitated to step in too quickly, fearing that it would only lead to more tension. For Jaden, the school days were long and challenging. He wanted to focus on his studies, but the constant harassment was hard to ignore. Still, he remained calm. He didn't lash out, didn't complain to the teachers, and didn't tell his parents. He simply kept going, day after day, quietly holding his ground. Outside of school, Jaden's life was very different. He spent his evenings at the local gym, training with his MMA coach. He practiced his striking, grappling, and submissions. He pushed himself harder than most adults could. His coach always emphasized discipline, respect, and self-control. Jaden took those lessons seriously. His training was about more than just physical strength. It was about building a strong mindset. But the bullies didn't see any of that. To them, Jaden was just the quiet kid who didn't fight back. They didn't know that he had the skills, the training, and the confidence to defend himself if he ever needed to. They only saw what they wanted to see, an easy target. And so the stage was set. Jaden, the disciplined fighter who chose peace over conflict, faced a group of bullies who thrived on pushing people's buttons. The question was, How far would they go before they realized just who they were dealing with? The bullying didn't start big. At first, it was the typical petty stuff. Side remarks in the hallways, a few loud laughs at his expense, maybe a shove into a locker when the teachers weren't looking. Jaden always brushed it off. He didn't even flinch most of the time. He had a way of staying calm, almost like he'd seen this all before. But the bullies, Corey and his group, didn't know that about Jaden. All they saw was the new black kid who didn't hang out with any of their cliques, who kept quiet and didn't push back. They figured he'd be easy to mess with. He'd transferred in about a month ago, and to them, he seemed like the perfect target. No friends yet, no reputation to protect him. Corey loved picking on kids who couldn't fight back. What the group didn't understand was that Jaden had a long history of staying under the radar. It wasn't because he was weak, far from it. Jaden had spent years training in mixed martial arts. His evenings were spent sparring in a gym, pushing his body and mind to their limits. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a disciplined athlete. His coach had taught him to keep his cool, to think before reacting, to never let emotion control him. And that's exactly what Jaden did at school. He kept his head down and stayed focused. The first time Corey knocked Jaden's books out of his hands in the hallway, Jaden bent down, picked them up, and moved on without saying a word. The group laughed and congratulated Corey on getting the new kid. But Jaden's silence wasn't fear. It was control. He knew that fights won in the gym didn't belong in the halls of a school. But Corey didn't see it that way. The lack of a response made him think he had free rein. Over the next week, the group's antics escalated. They cornered Jaden at his locker, making snide comments about his clothes, his hair, his quietness. "What's the matter? Too scared to talk?" Corey would sneer, shoving Jaden lightly. Jaden didn't respond. He knew better. But one day, Corey decided to push things further. It happened during lunch. Jaden had just sat down at an empty table, eating quietly as usual. Corey and his crew sauntered over, acting like they owned the place. Corey plopped down across from Jaden and smirked. "Hey, new guy, you don't mind if we sit here, do you?" Jaden didn't say anything, just took another bite of his food. The other boys sat down too, crowding the table. Corey leaned in, his voice louder now so everyone around could hear. "So, what's your deal? You don't talk, you don't smile. You think you're too good for us or something?" Jaden glanced up, calm as ever. "I just want to eat my lunch." "Oh, look at him," Corey said, his voice dripping with fake admiration. All cool and collected. "You got something to hide, tough guy? Is that why you don't ever stand up for yourself?" Jaden put down his fork and looked at Corey. "I'm not hiding anything. I just don't see the point in arguing with you." The table fell quiet. Some of Corey's friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jaden's calmness wasn't what they were used to. Most kids would have gotten angry or tried to leave. But Jaden stayed right where he was, completely composed. Corey didn't like that. He grabbed Jaden's lunch tray and tipped it, spilling the food onto the table. "Oops," he said with a grin. "Guess you'll have to go get more." Jaden slowly stood up. He picked up his tray and the spilled food, then carried it to the trash. When he returned, Corey was waiting for another reaction. But Jaden just sat down, as calm as before. The kids at the surrounding tables were watching now. Whispers spread through the cafeteria. "Why doesn't he do something?" one girl asked. "I would have thrown a punch by now," a guy said. But Jaden didn't give them what they wanted. He kept eating, ignoring Corey's taunts. What the crowd didn't know, what Corey didn't know, was that Jaden wasn't ignoring them because he was scared. He was ignoring them because he knew what he was capable of. He knew that if he snapped, It wouldn't end well for Corey. But Corey mistook Jaden's calmness for weakness. Later that day, in the locker room after gym class, Corey decided to make his move. "Hey, quiet kid," he called out, standing near the lockers as Jaden walked in. "You think you're real smart, don't you?" Jaden didn't answer. He grabbed his backpack and started to change. "I'm talking to you." Corey stepped closer. "What's the matter, scared? Or are you just too good to talk to me?" Jaden glanced at him, his expression steady. "I don't want any trouble, Corey. Just leave me alone." Corey laughed. "Oh, you don't want trouble. Guess what? Trouble's already here." He reached out, shoving Jaden's shoulder. The impact barely moved him. Jaden didn't even flinch. Corey shoved again, harder this time, and still, Jaden didn't react. The other boys in the locker room stopped what they were doing, watching the scene unfold. One of Corey's friends muttered, "Man, he's just standing there. That's weird." Another added, "You sure he's not going to swing back?" Corey smirked. "What's he going to do? He's all talk." But Jaden wasn't all talk. He had spent years learning how to handle situations like this. He knew that reacting out of anger would only escalate things. Instead, he took a step back, letting Corey's hand fall away. His calm, steady demeanor threw Corey off balance. "Fine," Corey said with a sneer. "Be a coward. See if I care." He stormed off, his friends following him out of the locker room. But as they left, the whispers began again. "I don't know," one kid said. "Something about that guy is different." Another chimed in. "Yeah, he doesn't act scared. It's like he knows something we don't." And they were right. Jaden did know something they didn't. He knew that his training wasn't just about physical strength. It was about mental control. He had learned that real power wasn't about showing off or picking fights. It was about knowing when to act and when to walk away. As the locker room emptied out, Jaden finished changing and left it for his next class. He didn't need to look back. He knew the whispers would keep spreading. And Corey? Corey would soon realize that the kid he'd been bullying wasn't who he thought he was. It started like any other lunch break. Students filled the cafeteria, chattering and laughing. Some sat in their usual groups, while others shuffled between tables, trying to find a spot. Jaden was at his regular place near the back, eating quietly as always. He never made a scene, never called attention to himself. For him, lunch was just a moment to refuel before the next class. But Corey had other plans. He was still annoyed that his attempts to intimidate Jaden had failed. Each time he tried to provoke the new kid, he got the same response. Calm, measured, unaffected. Corey was used to people either fighting back or breaking down. Jaden did neither, and it drove Corey nuts. He spotted Jaden sitting alone and nudged his friends. "Time to teach him a lesson," he said with a smirk. They followed him across the cafeteria, their footsteps loud enough to turn a few heads. Corey plopped down across from Jaden, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who's all by himself again. No friends yet?" Jaden didn't respond right away. He took another bite of his sandwich, then glanced up. "I'm not interested, Corey. Just let me eat." Corey's friends chuckled, but Corey leaned in closer. "You think you're so cool, huh? Too good to talk to us?" Jaden shook his head. "I just don't want any trouble. That's all." "Too late for that," Corey said. With a sudden movement, he grabbed Jaden's milk carton and tipped it over onto the tray. The milk spilled, pooling around Jaden's food. Some of the students nearby gasped, and the cafeteria grew a little quieter. Jaden looked at the mess, then at Corey. His expression didn't change. Calm, steady, the same as always. "You done?" he asked. Corey smirked. "Not even close." He reached across the table, acting as if he was going to shove Jaden's plate onto the floor. But Jaden's hand moved quickly, catching Corey's wrist before he could. The whole cafeteria seemed to freeze. Jaden didn't squeeze hard or make a big show of it. He just held Corey's wrist firmly, locking eyes with him. "I said I don't want trouble," Jaden repeated, his voice even, "but I'm not going to let you push me around." Corey yanked his hand back, glaring. "What? You think you're tough or something?" Jaden didn't answer. He just picked up his tray, stood, and walked over to the trash can. Corey and his friends sat there, watching him as whispers spread through the room. "What's his deal?" someone asked. "Why isn't he scared?" When Jaden came back, the table was still tense. Corey hadn't left. He couldn't. Something about Jaden's calmness felt like a challenge, and Corey wasn't one to back down. "You think you're better than me?" Corey asked, louder this time so everyone could hear. "You think you can just ignore me?" Jaden sighed. "I think you're looking for a fight I'm not going to give you." Corey stood up. "You don't get to walk away from me." He stepped around the table, standing directly in front of Jaden. "If you're not going to fight, maybe I'll just make you." The cafeteria was dead silent now. Everyone was watching. Teachers hadn't noticed yet, but that only made the moment more charged. Corey's friends looked uneasy. Even they weren't sure how far this was going to go. Corey pushed Jaden lightly, testing him. Jaden didn't move much. He just stood there, unflinching. Then Corey pushed again, harder this time. Jaden stepped back slightly, but his expression remained calm. "Leave me alone," Jaden said, his voice calm but firm. "I don't want this." Corey laughed, but it sounded forced. "What are you going to do about it?" Jaden didn't answer. He just kept that steady gaze. Some students whispered to each other. "I heard he knows MMA," one said. "Is that true?" "I think so," another replied. "My cousin saw him at a gym once. He's really good." The rumors reached Corey's ears. He paused for a moment, uncertainty flashing across his face, but he quickly covered it with a smirk. "Yeah, right. You? MMA? Prove it." Jaden crossed his arms. "I don't need to prove anything to you." "You're scared," Corey sneered. "Admit it. You're scared." "I'm not scared," Jaden said evenly, "but I'm not going to fight you just to make you feel better." Corey's frustration boiled over. He lunged forward as if to shove Jaden again, but this time, Jaden stepped to the side smoothly. Corey stumbled slightly, catching himself on the edge of the table. The students watching erupted in gasps and murmurs. Corey turned, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You think that was funny?" he shouted. "I think you should stop before you do something you regret," Jaden said calmly. Corey glared, but he didn't move forward again. Something about the way Jaden carried himself, the steady eyes, the relaxed stance, made Corey hesitate. It was as if Jaden wasn't just standing there. He was in complete control of the situation. One of Corey's friends finally spoke up. "Corey, maybe we should go." "No," Corey snapped, though his voice wavered. "I'm not done." But he didn't move. He just stood there, trying to decide his next move, while the entire cafeteria watched in silence. Jaden stood quietly, waiting. He wasn't goading Corey, wasn't taunting him. He just waited, his calm expression unshaken. Finally, Corey stepped back. "Whatever," he muttered. "You're not worth it." He turned and walked away, his friends trailing after him. The cafeteria buzzed with chatter, students speculating about what just happened. Jaden sat back down, picked up his sandwich, and resumed eating. For him, the confrontation was over. He didn't feel the need to celebrate or draw attention to himself. He had stayed true to what he believed. No unnecessary fights, no needless drama. But the rest of the school saw things differently. Corey's reputation had taken a hit, and Jaden's calm confidence became the talk of the hallways. Students whispered about his rumored MMA skills, his composed demeanor, and how he'd stood up to Corey without even throwing a punch. And Corey? He avoided Jaden from that day on. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been outmatched, not physically, but mentally. Jaden hadn't needed to fight to win. His control, his discipline, and his unshakable calm had been enough to turn the tables completely. After that lunchroom showdown, Corey's behavior toward Jaden changed. He still kept up the tough act, but something was different. He didn't corner Jaden as much. He didn't talk as loudly when Jaden was nearby. And more than once, Corey was seen whispering to his friends, glancing Jaden's way with a puzzled expression. The rumors swirling through the school had finally reached Corey, and they were starting to stick. One of Corey's buddies, Nick, leaned over during math class and whispered, "Hey, man, you know what I heard? Jaden's been training in MMA since he was a kid. Like real competition-level stuff." Corey rolled his eyes, trying to play it cool. "Yeah, sure," he muttered. "I bet he just watches UFC and thinks he's tough." But Nick didn't back down. "No, I'm serious. My cousin's gym? That's where Jaden trains. He's got a coach and everything. I guess that's why he never fights back. He doesn't have to." Corey didn't say anything, but inside he was rattled. What if it was true? What if Jaden really was a trained fighter? It would explain a lot. The calm responses, the lack of fear, the way Jaden just stood there when Corey tried to push him. Corey started to feel a pit in his stomach every time he thought about it. Meanwhile, other students were picking up on the same rumors. By the next week, it seemed like half the school knew. In gym class, some of the guys started giving Jaden a little more space. "Hey, I heard you're a fighter," one kid said hesitantly. "That true?" Jaden just shrugged. "I train," he said simply, leaving it at that. He didn't brag, didn't elaborate, but that one word, train, was enough to confirm everything. The whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the school. For Corey, it was humiliating. People started talking about how close he'd come to picking a fight with Jaden. "Man, you almost got destroyed," one of Corey's classmates said, shaking his head. Good thing he didn't snap. Corey tried to brush it off, laughing nervously. "Yeah, whatever. He's just a quiet kid. I don't think he's really that tough." But deep down, Corey knew he'd been wrong. And now, everyone else knew it too. What made it worse was that Jaden never gloated. He didn't bring up the rumors, didn't acknowledge the whispers. He just kept going to class, staying quiet and training after school. That only made Corey's embarrassment grow. Jaden's silence felt like a mirror, reflecting all of Corey's insecurity back at him. Every time he saw Jaden walk by, calm and composed, Corey felt his chest tighten. He had underestimated Jaden in every way, and now he couldn't escape the consequences. A week later, a surprising announcement came over the school's PA system. "Congratulations to our very own Jaden Walker, who just placed first in a regional mixed martial arts competition this past weekend. Way to represent our school, Jaden." The entire cafeteria turned to look at Jaden, who was sitting in his usual spot. He glanced up, nodded at the attention, and then went back to eating. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't need to. For Corey, though, it was a final confirmation. The guy he'd been picking on was the real deal. Corey felt the weight of his own actions pressing down on him. He had tried to intimidate someone who could have taken him down with one move. It was like standing on the thin ice and suddenly realizing how deep the water was below. Corey's friends weren't much help either. "Guess you're lucky he didn't fight back," one of them said, snickering. "Yeah," another added, "he probably would have snapped you in half." Corey forced a laugh, but inside he was cringing. He didn't need them reminding him. He was already playing the scene over and over in his head. The moments in the cafeteria, the locker room, the times he had tried to get under Jaden's skin. Every memory came with a new layer of regret. Jaden, on the other hand, continued to keep his distance. He didn't seek Corey out, didn't look for payback. But that only made Corey feel worse. Corey had gone out of his way to humiliate Jaden, and Jaden hadn't retaliated at all. Instead, Jaden had calmly carried on, letting the truth about his skills come to light on its own. One day after class, Corey saw Jaden in the hallway and hesitated. He wanted to say something, an apology, an acknowledgement of how wrong he had been, but he couldn't get the words out. Jaden glanced his way, nodded slightly, and kept walking. Corey stood there, unsure what to do. The usual confidence he felt with his friends was gone. All that was left was the realization that he'd picked the wrong target, for all the wrong reasons. By the end of the semester, the story had spread beyond their school. Local news ran a small segment on Jaden's MMA success, highlighting his discipline and skill. Corey saw the broadcast and felt another pang of regret. He had been given a front-row seat to Jaden's calm strength, but instead of respecting it, he had tried to tear it down. Jaden's rise in reputation wasn't just about his fighting skills. Students admired how he handled himself, never bragging, never starting trouble, and never lowering himself to Corey's level. His ability to stay composed under pressure became the real story, and Corey knew he had been on the wrong side of it from the start. Jaden didn't let the buzz around him change who he was. As the weeks went on, he stayed the same calm, focused student. People started to see that his strength wasn't just physical. It was the way he carried himself, the way he handled every situation with confidence and humility. That respect grew, and soon Jaden wasn't just the new kid anymore. He was someone people looked up to. Corey, however, had a different journey. The truth was, after everything that happened, he felt ashamed. The more he heard about Jaden's training and discipline, the more he realized how wrong he'd been. It wasn't just about picking on someone who could fight back. It was the fact that he had underestimated Jaden as a person. Corey knew deep down that he had judged Jaden without even trying to understand him. At first, Corey avoided him. He couldn't face the person he'd wronged so many times. But one day after school, he saw Jaden leaving the building alone. Corey's stomach twisted. This was his chance to make things right. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and walked over. "Hey, Jaden," Corey said, his voice quieter than usual. Jaden turned, his expression as calm as ever. "What's up, Corey?" There was no hostility in Jaden's voice. No sarcasm. Corey wasn't sure if that made it easier or harder to speak. "Listen, man," Corey began, shoving his hands in his pockets. I want to say I'm sorry. For everything." Jaden nodded slightly. "Thanks," he said simply. Corey wasn't expecting that. He thought Jaden might blow him off, or worse, tell him he didn't deserve forgiveness. But Jaden didn't do that. He just stood there, giving Corey the space to say what he needed to say. "I was a jerk," Corey continued. "I didn't know who you were, and I didn't care. I don't know, I thought it was funny. But it wasn't. It wasn't funny at all. I get it now." Jaden tilted his head slightly, as if considering Corey's words. "You didn't know," he said after a moment, "and now you do." It wasn't exactly forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. It was just Jaden being Jaden, calm, straightforward, and fair. Corey nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over time, things slowly shifted. Corey didn't magically become Jaden's friend, but he stopped being his enemy. He kept his distance and tried to focus on his own behavior. He started to notice how other students looked at Jaden, how they admired his quiet confidence. And while Corey knew he'd never be that person, he also knew he could at least stop being the guy who tore people down. As for Jaden, he continued to focus on his training and studies. He never let the past define him, but he also didn't forget it. What happened with Corey became a reminder of how important it was to stay true to himself, even when others didn't understand him. He had learned long ago that strength wasn't just about winning fights. It was about standing firm in who you are, no matter what anyone else says or does. Other students at the school started to take note. They saw how Jaden handled himself, and it inspired some of them to be a little kinder, a little braver, and a little more respectful. It wasn't just about being strong physically. It was about having the strength to be patient, to listen, and to keep going, even when things got tough. For example, one girl named Emma, who used to feel invisible, decided to join the debate team after seeing how Jaden held his ground without losing his cool. Another boy, Marco, who used to get teased for being small, started attending the same gym as Jaden. Inspired by Jaden's quiet confidence, Marco found his own strength, not just in lifting weights, but in knowing that he had value no matter what others said. These weren't dramatic changes, but they added up. Jaden's presence in the school became a quiet, steady influence. Teachers noticed it too. They saw a shift in the atmosphere. Less tension in the hallways, more students willing to step in if they saw someone being treated unfairly. And though Jaden never claimed credit for it, his actions spoke louder than any words could. Corey's friends also began to act differently. A few of them, after seeing how things played out, started questioning their own behavior. One day, Nick, who used to laugh along with Corey's insults, approached Jaden after gym class. "Hey, I just wanted to say I think it's cool how you handled all that stuff before," Nick said, looking at the ground. "I mean, I was part of it. And I don't know, man. You're stronger than I'll ever be." Jaden looked at him and nodded. "Thanks, Nick." That simple exchange stuck with Nick. He realized he didn't have to follow Corey's lead anymore. He could make his own choices, and he chose to be better. Slowly, the dynamic of Corey's group began to shift. They weren't perfect, but they weren't the same pack of bullies they used to be. By the end of the year, the changes were clear. Jaden had won the respect of his classmates, not because he was the best fighter in the gym, but because he had the inner strength to stay true to himself. He showed everyone that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean throwing punches. Sometimes it means staying calm, keeping your head high, and refusing to stoop to someone else's level. Corey, too, learned a lot. He still had a long way to go, but he started seeing people differently. He began to understand that strength isn't about making others feel small. It's about knowing who you are and being okay with it. Corey never became best friends with Jaden, but he respected him. And in time, Corey started to respect himself more too. Jaden, however, didn't focus on whether Corey had changed or not. That wasn't his responsibility. His job was to stay disciplined, keep learning, and continue to grow. As he prepared for his next MMA competition, he knew that the lessons he had learned about patience, humility, and staying grounded would serve him well in the ring and beyond. The entire story comes down to this: never underestimate the strength of someone who chooses to stay calm under pressure. Jaden didn't just win over his classmates. He showed them that real power doesn't come from throwing punches or shouting the loudest. It comes from confidence, discipline, and knowing who you are. This isn't just about Jaden's MMA skills. It's about the way he handled himself, how he stood up for what he believed in without needing to put anyone down. His story is a reminder that true strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about rising above the noise and setting an example for others to follow. Now it's your turn to think about what this means for you. Have you ever judged someone before you really got to know them? Or maybe you've faced challenges that required you to stand firm in your beliefs. Whatever your story, remember, strength isn't just about muscles. It's about character. What do you think? Have you ever seen someone show true strength by staying calm and respectful? Let us know in the comments, and if you found Jaden's story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We've got plenty more uplifting stories like this one coming soon. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.